go for it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to PDQ Live. It is the last webcast of Security Awareness Month. And we figured we'd talk about all the fun that comes with getting your security compliance for your company.
SOC2 Compliance, yep.
Yeah, listen, I could do this. I could teach all about it. I'm delightful.
You are.
But we have with us the person that set PDQ up to be SOC2 Compliant, Julian, who joins from a long way away. And we figure instead of my random thoughts, we'd go with an actual expert.
Why not?
For a change.
Let's give it a try. See how it goes.
Hi, Julian.
Hi, how's it going?
So, Julian, let's just tell our customers a little bit about how you came to do this, because they might be in a similar spot. So you actually didn't come from a security background. You were just told, hey, we need to get SOC 2 compliant. Go figure all this out. Is that right?
That's more or less exactly how it happened. Yeah. I was an IT director at the time, and we were in a position where they wanted the organization that I worked for at the time, which was Smart Deploy, to become SOC 2 compliant. I didn't know much about compliance, but I knew enough about IT to be able to try doing it. And through that process, learned a lot about how to do compliance for an organization. Yeah, it was a lot of learning, but done a couple since then. So here we are.
So the main thing that I hear when people first bring it up is for the first implementation, it's very expensive. So what makes spending all that money worth it? Well, I guess what's the advantages for you or your customers for getting that done?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting to think about it from a couple of different angles. Firstly, when you're thinking about compliance, there are lots of different types of compliance. Some of them are industry-based certifications, some of them are general certifications, and then also in the world of compliance, there are just straight-up laws that you're going to be obligated to follow if you operate in specific areas of the world. Probably one of the most famous ones is in Europe. They have this law called GDPR, which concerns consumer data privacy. And if you sell to customers in the EU, then you have to be compliant in that way. So, yeah. So, firstly, you might be obligated to do so just by virtue of where your business is operating. But beyond that, a lot of industries have specific certifications that make them more attractive to customers or might be required. If you are in an industry like healthcare, for example, there are certifications which you need to have if you want to operate in that industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe let's step back just a little bit, though. Can you just give us an overall description of what cybersecurity compliance is? Just
sure.
And then possibly
brief description.
Specifically to SOC 2, we have a question that says, what is SOC 2? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. So all compliance is kind of concerning like a series of standards, usually related to kind of all centered around data privacy, but touching things like network security and encryption and all these different facets of what you could say is part of the way that cybersecurity works in your organization. And those standards are usually organized into some kind of formal body of rules, if you will, or certification. SOC 2 is one of the most popular ones. It's a US-based certification that is kind of a more general cybersecurity kind of compliance certification. It was kind of devised because a lot of cloud service providing companies, companies that provide cloud services to customers like, Azure or Google Cloud or whatever, needed some kind of measurement for how cloud services specifically should be organized with regards to cybersecurity.
Okay.
So SOC 2 is really based around that in particular.
Okay. And there's two types, right? Can you talk about the differences between type 1 and type 2?
Sure. And SOC 2 is kind of a little bit peculiar, isn't it? It does have a couple of different flavors, which is not the case for all these certifications, but SOC 2 comes in a SOC 2 Type 1 and SOC 2 Type 2. They went very creative with their naming scheme variations. And Type 1 is basically a measurement of an organization's ability to comply with the principles in SOC 2 at a specific point in time. So you decide you want to become SOC 2 Type 1 compliant, you go in and you check whether everything in your organization is configured in a way that's considered compliant. You make sure your documentation's up to date. And then you have a point-in-time audit. Auditing firm will come in and basically say, okay, looking at all the policies you've written and all of the things that you say that you're doing in your description of how your organization is, basically cyber secure, they'll determine if you are or not, and then issue you a report saying, hey, on this date, X company was compliant, and that's what a SOC 2 Type 1 report is.
So like a snapshot of that point in time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. That's precisely what it is. SOC 2 Type 2 is similar. You still have to do everything you did do in the Type 1, except this basically it's a measurement of how you were able to remain compliant in that way over a period of time. And the period of time is kind of actually up to you. Just one of the ways in which SOC 2 is a really weird certification is a lot of the things are up to you. But the most typical period of time that it's measured over is a 12-month period. And when the auditing firm comes in to create a report, a SOC 2 Type 2 report, they will ask for evidence from that entire 12-month period. You have to select samples that they ask for, like, hey, this employee got hired on May the 4th. We want to see their onboarding documentation and make sure that all of the things that happened are recorded in the way that you specify. We want to see logs from, your business systems, like your Azure sensors and stuff that recorded incidents that happened in the month of July or whatever, and you have to provide that.
So let me get this straight. So Type 1 is I can get my stuff together for a small period of time. Type 2 is I'm maintaining that for a longer period of time, and I decide the length of time.
Yes, that's correct.
So that's kind of lame, Julian.
Well, my take on this,
in what way?
especially for security, the community itself holds everybody up to a very high standard.
Yeah.
So if you claim you are taking part in the security community and accidentally is bad enough, but purposely bypassing after, the blowback from that, just the community turn on you is going to be horrific.
Right, but if I see a Type 1, I'm going to be like, big deal. Anybody can do it for a short period of time. But what if I get a Type 2 that's 5 years old? I'm going to be like, that's useless. I mean, is it just me?
Yeah. No, and it's not just you. That's absolutely correct. I think that, and the flip side of what we were saying before about why would an organization want to be compliant, we, as consumers of cloud services, we can also go and read the SOC 2 reports of these services that we're, thinking of adding into our ecosystem. If you decide, hey, I want to start using Zoom as, a service that we use internally, you can go and read their SOC 2 Type 2 report, and you can be like, okay, this was recent, so I feel like that's good. I can look at the content of it and look at if there's anything in there that I feel like seems like I don't agree with that, or I don't trust that, then you can make a determination. But the report is, having it in the first place shows that you've taken a fairly significant amount of effort to make your cybersecurity posture pretty mature. Yeah. But the content of the reports and the age of the reports and the length of the audit period, that's all kind of like stuff that you have to decide how you feel about that as an individual.
Let's say you're, random company, Okta, and you recently had
just to pick a name out of the hat.
Yeah, just a significant breach or something. Does that invalidate everything? Like you have to go get recertified, or is it just more of oops, I apologize, or they pay a fine? I guess what's the fallout from that if you are compliant during a breach?
Yeah, that's a great question. It kind of depends on how much the company feels. It depends on how much damage they're trying to mitigate, I guess. A lot of organizations implement what they call bridge letters, which are basically like these reports that come in between their major certification assessments to describe what their compliance posture was like at a point in time in between certifications. But often, absolutely, you're right. They'll go ahead and try to get recertified as soon as they can to have a report which demonstrates that they remediated whatever they did badly.
So there's no SOC 2 jail. You don't get demerits, nothing like that.
No, there's no SOC 2 jail.
So I guess I'm naive. So you go to all these websites of companies and you see the SOC 2 sticker, but that shouldn't be what you're looking at. You should ask for the report and see how long it's been, right?
Sure.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Okay, so let's...
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like it's one of those things where, like, the sticker being there or not can give you a pretty good indication of like, okay, this organization is at this level of, kind of cybersecurity. If they have a SOC 2 certification or an ISO 27001 certification or whatever, you can look at that and think, okay, so they've put quite a lot of effort into this. And not only that, Tara, but a lot of companies will be like, we won't engage with a vendor that doesn't have X certification.
Yeah.
So you might be looking for that as a requirement for someone who you want to do business with. So
before we go into the whys and kind of break it down, can you just go over quickly the compliance standards by industry for us? So we talked about GDPR already.
That's a big list.
Yeah.
We could, yeah. I mean, I'll give you some examples maybe, yeah.
Okay.
So I just mentioned ISO 27001 or 2. There's 27001 or 27002. Those are ones that were created by the International Standards Organization. Those are similar in scope to SOC 2, a little broader, a little harder to obtain, and also much more internationally recognized. So that's one thing you hear about a lot. There are some which are sort of specific to a particular kind of business, like an element of business, like PCI DSS surrounds payment processing standards. If you collect or process credit card information, if you are a service that does this or you're a business that decides to do that internally, then that certification is one that you can get that shows that you're able to do that in a way that's compliant. There are some that are related to industries like the healthcare industry has like HITRUST and HIPAA, and both of those are certifications which are surrounding patient data privacy. And then you've got like federal government ones like FedRAMP, and often if you want to do business with the US government in a capacity, you have to have a certification like that. So there's ones like that, basically, that are sort of related to the kind of work that you're doing or the industry that you're in or a particular standard like that. But there is, like, as Jordan was saying, there is a very long list, which we could be here all day talking about the specific ones, and let's not do that.
So I'm going to assume, though, if you hit the standard where you get HITRUST for healthcare, you probably could just say, hey, come on by SOC 2 and get it because the standard's probably higher at that point. Or is it more of a...
I mean, there's a lot of overlap between tons of these. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like often people consider like getting a couple in parallel even because so much of them overlap with what's involved with them. And a lot of them are basically surrounding data privacy, right? And so if you're storing data in a way that's considered secure for one set of standards, then you're probably doing a lot of what another one would too. And if that's just going to expand the customer base that is interested in your product because they're like, you seem trustworthy, I know what ISO is, then you might just want to expand the scope of the certifications you have to include more. Yeah.
And we talked about
that's a common path.
Global governing bodies. I'm going to call them governing bodies, even though there's no SOC jail, which is disappointing. How is it handled in the United States?
Sorry, how is which handled in the United States?
I think she's asking about data privacy.
Yeah, the governing bodies, or how is it regulated?
Oh yeah, because because GDPR, which is the one concerning consumer privacy, is the EU set of laws, and that was kind of the one of the first really serious attempts, like in the world, at the government trying to make a standard for data privacy, and that's obviously in the EU. And then after that, we've had a couple of different standards like that introduced in the United States as well, starting with California with the CCPA. And then we had, I think Virginia was next, and then Colorado, and then Utah. There's 12 states now that have an independently written set of policies, which are sort of legal policies to do with data privacy. So that's happened over the course of several years now, but those are becoming more relevant in the United States as well. And you're obviously, if you do business in any of those states, then you need to uphold those laws.
I would like a global one, just because I like to be able to say, hey, don't keep my data anymore, and know they have to comply. That would make me happy.
Ever again. Okay, so
it's also like, since all of these are all slightly different as well, it's a huge pain to have to keep track of what all of the different global policies are, even if you are if you do business internationally. I mean,
so we talked a little bit about all of the, I guess, the value and the different types, but in general, what are the types of things going into it? If you're looking to set it up on your own, we can't really cover here's how you set it up because everything's unique per environment. But is it like SLAs and certain things? Like, I guess, what is the overall, cover on, is it just this port's locked down, or is it if something goes wrong, I have an SLA for when it will be resolved?
Where do you start?
It's a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. Yeah, scoping it in the first place is a big part of it. Depending on which certification you're going with, that is also going to change. But even, let's just zoom in on SOC 2 because that is the one that I'm the most familiar with. Even SOC 2 has what they call these 5 trust services criteria, and they're basically different areas of the compliance set, which you can opt to include in your certification. There's security, availability, confidentiality, privacy, and I think processing integrity. And each of those covers different things that you could include in your cybersecurity implementation. So security basically speaks for itself, but then there's also availability, which if you're a cloud service provider is like how this SLAs that you were just talking about, how are you set up to be able to endure any sort of tolerate any downtime or any service degradation? What are your disaster recovery strategies? What are your failover strategies, your redundancy and scaling strategies? And then some of the other areas to do with privacy and stuff might relate to how you just store information, what sort of encryption protocols you use, that kind of thing. So you can choose which ones you want to be certified in, with the exception of security. Every SOC 2 certification requires that you have that one. But you can kind of tailor it a little bit to suit your organization too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and a couple things I learned this week, and we already talked about this, is you need to engage with a CPA firm when you start your audit.
To do the audit, correct.
And I know I asked this, I'm
right.
like, what the crap are accountants doing in cybersecurity?
It does sound a little funny, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I feel like it was one of those things as well with SOC 2 where someone had to step up really. There was for cloud service providers specifically, there wasn't really an excellent compliance model certification that specifically spoke to this very important part of the trends in IT, right, is that a lot of us have moved from at least a model where we have some stuff that we host on premise, but a lot of stuff that we consume through cloud services. So the industry in general is sort of tending towards at least relying to a large extent on cloud services, all the way from little things like we're talking about meeting services all the way up to directory services like Azure AD and stuff. How do we maintain a standard of excellence with regards to security as that increasingly becomes a concern in the industry? And so this certification, SOC 2, was kind of designed with that in mind, with that trend in mind. Yeah. And I guess some nice accountants thought of that first.
Well, and they have special training as well, right? But when I first learned that, I was like, what?
Right. Yes.
Then I also learned that I've missed my calling in life, that I need to be a cybersecurity auditor because I love that crap. I love it.
You would be very good at that.
I'd learned that, and I wanted to say this because I think this process, is scary. It is for a lot of people, but you're already doing a lot of these things that they're checking for.
Yeah, it's true.
It seems most of the expense is figuring out which parts you're missing.
Yeah.
Because most likely you're still hitting I'll say a decent percentage, because I'm going to give good faith in business practices.
Well, and Julian can expand on this, but a lot of it is AD hygiene, Azure hygiene, your onboarding, offboarding policies. The problem is when you have to involve other departments. That is when the problem arises. But Julian can expand on that, of course, more. But there are companies you can hire to help you through this process, right, Julian? So when we wanted to talk about cost a little bit. I know you can't give us an exact cost, but try.
It can vary a lot. So the short version is basically, I think that the way that I like to describe it is that you're looking at a number that has 5 digits in it, but it can vary a lot in that range. You can go a number of different routes with this. You can decide to do everything internally if you're a little bit crazy, and that will involve a lot of time on your part, a lot of research, a lot of writing documentation, and a lot of corralling process and people to be able to become prepared to do an audit. Next step up is kind of, you can use, there's a lot of software out there like that's designed to facilitate you becoming SOC 2 ready. There's like Strata, I think, is one of them, and Vanta. There's a couple of products like that, which are basically cloud-based platforms, and you can give it a lot of information about your organization, and it's going to help you templatize process documentation that you need to write, which will be part of that audit, and also to sort of help you understand what evidence you're going to need to provide ahead of time so that you can try to get your systems in such a state that when you get asked, hey, I want to see the log for this, that you know what to look for and that you've already got all of that logging enabled to the degree that you need to and that kind of thing. So there's tools like that. And then the sort of like the heavyweight option is to just basically engage a consulting organization that specializes in compliance to help you do all of that. And they will often tailor write documentation or process documentation for your organization, and then sort of do almost like a mock audit by like getting all the stuff that you need together ahead of time to make sure everything is going to work when you get asked to do it for real. And that tends to be on the more expensive end of the options available to you, but
and I imagine that's
there's
probably
different paths you can take.
That's probably the time consuming part, right? Doing the policies, implementing the controls, all that stuff.
It depends on how good your stuff is already. Like as you were saying before, you're probably doing a lot of this already. And as Jordan was saying, probably it's like filling those gaps. That's really the big thing. And for a lot of people, it's process documentation. A lot of people have got kind of an informal policy, like, yeah, we take care of backups.
Yeah.
Everything's encrypted. But when you get asked questions like, okay, where's the document that says what encryption standards you use? Where's the document that describes how you actually do your disaster recovery policy? Where's the log of the last time you did a disaster recovery exercise? Where are the meeting minutes from that? Did you record it? Like, those are the things where people might have a gap in what they need to be able to become compliant. So they're doing kind of doing most of it, but not really formalized to a point that you could say, here's the evidence that we're doing all of that.
So we've had a couple of questions that come in that refer to earlier stuff that I think would be good to cover before we go on.
Yeah, hang on here. Okay. First question, my apologies if I missed this, as I was momentarily distracted. Would it be beneficial to have both ISO 27001 as well as SOC 2? Tim M.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that most people would say that most people take the step of getting SOC 2, and then later, if they need it, they'll move to ISO 27001, since it is a little more comprehensive. But a lot of people will maintain both certifications simply because, depending on one of the main reasons that you want to do this is to attract clients who are looking for organizations that have some kind of cybersecurity certification. If you're already doing everything in both of them and you're maintaining it, you may as well keep auditing on them and getting those certifications. Sometimes people look for SOC 2, sometimes people look for ISO 27001. The biggest distinction there is that often people who are just operating in the United States will consider SOC 2 to be good enough, right? It's a US certification that's very well recognized inside the States. But as soon as their business starts to move more internationally and they work with more international customers in like the EU, for example, then it starts to be more relevant. Those organizations, if they're asking for anything, are probably going to be asking for ISO 27001 simply because it carries more weight in that area of the world.
So it seems to me that if you're American-based in SOC 2, you want ISO if you're looking to move outside of it. If you already have the ISO 27001, getting SOC 2 at that point is the equivalent of putting a Made in America sticker on your product. Like, I don't think it's adding more than the more stringent one, but it says...
I mean, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily, because the only reason I say that a lot of people might have both is because if you already have SOC 2, it's not as if you're going to just like stop doing everything that you did to do that. So you might as well keep that certification because, hey, you worked for it and you can have it. But going from 27001 to adding SOC 2 is a less common path.
Well, and we haven't discussed this, and it's probably a good time. Why even go through the pain? It's really all about the money. It's about attracting more customers, getting the big contracts, right?
A little bit sad to say, but yeah, I think that's basically that's basically true. I think that it's one of those things where at a certain point, when you're working with particularly enterprise scale customers, the conversation, we always have this conversation when someone wants to start a business relationship with you of like, okay, so what is your security situation? And they'll send you one of these questionnaires that people have probably seen, which has got like 600 questions all about everything that you do in your organization. And those conversations can be very difficult, very complicated on both sides. They can be very time consuming. Having a certification like this is a way of saying, hey, we would love to buy your products. Do you have ISO 27001 so we can continue talking? And if you say no, then they're like, cool. No, thanks.
That's what Rachel just said the same thing. You guys are like-minded.
Yeah,
you guys are almost like you work together. Weird.
That's strange.
Got a couple more questions if you're ready for those.
Let's do it.
You bet.
Okay. One from Marcel. He says, if somebody requests your SOC 2 compliance details, isn't that like revealing your internal working details?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. Kind of, honestly. I think that the way that the report is written is such that it gives enough information that you can understand what type of security posture someone has, without necessarily, like, the objective is to not necessarily reveal any information that could be used to compromise those systems. I think it's fair to say that, you know, in any conversation that you have with a potential customer, if you ask them like, hey, how are you going to store my data? That's a fair question for a customer to ask you. That's the nature of the sort of reply that they would get from reading a SOC 2 report. Oh, it's encrypted and with this particular methodology and it's all stored on this service. Those are legitimate questions that anyone could ask you. And yeah, sure. I mean, I think it does tell people a little bit about your environment, but as I was saying, you're probably going to be ready to give that information to a customer if they ask anyway. I suppose the other thing about it that's quite common is that if you are very, very confident about your security posture and you're an organization like Microsoft, they publish them publicly. Other organizations, you're not required to. You can say that you're SOC 2 compliant, have a conversation with someone about it, and then say, okay, look, sounds like this deal feels like it's legitimate. I'm going to give you the SOC 2 report voluntarily now that you've asked for it, and not offer it publicly. So there's some leeway in how that documentation gets passed around, but generally speaking, the content of the report, it's designed not to be a way of compromising people's systems, but you do have to describe them to some extent.
Okay, a couple more questions have come in. If your org is primarily using cloud-based apps, can you still get ISO 27001 compliant? Absolutely
you can. One of the components of both SOC 2 and ISO 27001 and many other of these certifications is that you have an internal policy for how you engage with third-party vendors. What sort of due diligence do you do when you're considering something like, say, most of your infrastructure is based off a platform like GCP? What made you decide on GCP? How do you use their services? What elements of how they are set up did you consider in engaging with them as a vendor? Did you read their SOC 2 report? Is that part of your process to every year, every 6 months or whatever, review what the certifications of the vendors that you use have done in their cybersecurity efforts as well? So even if you're not necessarily the architect or host of parts of your infrastructure, they can still be part of your certification. And the way that's different is not necessarily that I built it this way. It's that we looked at this service and we decided it would be best because it's secure in this way.
All right, and security legend Rachel Coleman in the chat said she did ISO 27001 for a purely cloud-based company previously.
And Rachel, you have a standing invitation always. Are you serious?
Yeah, that's what we put. All right, one more question that just snuck in. Are the ISO 27001 and SOC 2 certifications similar to the new FTC guidelines?
I don't actually know the answer to that question. I would say that there's probably a lot of overlap in general. I haven't seen any particular comparison that goes through where they overlap. I will say that ISO and SOC 2 themselves overlap maybe about 80% in terms of the stuff that's in them. But as for those new guidelines, I'm not entirely sure. I'm sorry, I can't really answer that.
And this is just my take on it. It seems to me FTC guidelines based on what that governing body is. It's do these things or else, where SOC 2 is verification you have done these things. Would be my guess.
No, it's not. Yeah, absolutely. Like the privacy standards and such that are in existing laws, like the CCPA and stuff, are legally binding. You can get fined for not doing those things. Whereas, as you were saying, Jordan, basically like SOC 2 and ISO and stuff are saying, here is the volunteering, here is our stance in terms of cybersecurity.
Apparently, SOC 2 is a 5-figure pinky promise.
5-figure pinky promise. That's the best description ever. I love it.
All right. Is there anything else that we haven't covered, or is it time to shut it down? We kind of jumped all over the map here.
I think we covered it.
All right.
I think it was great.
I think somehow we managed to cover everything we intended to.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thanks everyone tuning in. We know SOC 2 on the surface isn't fun, but it is important. It shows maturity within an organization. It helps trust with customers. It's going to help you make sales. So it's a path worth going to. So hopefully this helps you at least know where to start. And apparently it starts with the CPA.
Apparently.
For PDQ, I'm Jordan.
I'm Tara.
And thank you very much, Julian. Thank you to everyone who took the time out to join us today and learn a little more about the riveting topic of SOC 2 and compliance. Please like and subscribe. Leave us your comments. We love your comments. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you back here next time.